The content presented in this podcast and YouTube show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health or a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard or seen on this show. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of this show are not responsible for any adverse effects resulting from your use of or reliance on any information presented.
Andrea, can you hear us?
Many years ago, I died for 26 seconds. There are so many people in this world that have experienced life events that have led to their sole purpose. Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea will bring you these significant life events that demonstrate how to use those moments for guidance and life purpose. These are our stories. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea Lynn. Today's guest is here to talk to us about psychology and spirituality. Let's welcome Katie Turner. Hi, Katie.
Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here because I think this is going to be something that a lot of my other guests have not touched on, the psychology piece in terms of spirituality. So can you open with sharing how you went from traditional psychology to incorporating spirituality? Like what made you do that?
Yeah, it's definitely, never would have thought I'd be here early on. I was definitely very skeptical, wouldn't have described myself as spiritual or intuitive. So my early training was very much kind of the conscious mind, behavior change, more of the Western type psychology parts. And a few years early in the field, I was experiencing my own burnout and just questioning some of the teachings I was getting around, like sometimes therapy just helps people not get worse, and that's kind of it. And
Yeah.
it felt like there was something missing. I really enjoyed traveling, had traveled to different countries, and I ended up taking a one-way ticket to India and Nepal, and I spent almost a year there. So in hindsight, I was engaging in a lot of practices that really can actually help increase spiritual connection or spiritual awakening. I just didn't really know that at the time that could have happened. So then I started having my own experiences of more of non-ordinary states of consciousness or spiritual awakening and intuitive type experiences, and realizing there's something more going on there that I wasn't taught or isn't acknowledged in psychology. And traditional Western psychology, sometimes there can be barriers for people about even talking about any of those experiences because the kind of diagnostic manual in the mental health system, or like more the medicalization system, doesn't have a lot of places to put that. So there can still be fear, shame, or stigma with it. I definitely we didn't get any specialized training in spirituality in traditional.
Do you feel like in traditional medicine, it boxes everybody into this cookie cutter formula for helping them? Like you do this, this, and this, and everybody should be helped. And if they can't be helped, then maybe they just need medication, or their life is just going to be what it's going to be. Is that kind of where you realize, okay, you know what, there's more. And I think spirituality is that piece, because that is that dynamic piece of that individuality that can help people.
I think there's aspects of that. I mean, it's really complex. Anytime we're dealing with individual people, it gets so complex that it's really hard to make it like a social media meme that's going to resonate with everybody, because we're these complicated, multi-layered onions with so many different factors that can contribute to different symptoms or different areas where we feel stuck.
But do you feel like traditional medicine doesn't recognize that piece of it?
With the spirituality piece, when it comes to the mental health model, it's hard. Yeah.
The multi-dimensional piece. Like, do you feel like traditional medicine doesn't recognize that piece of people?
No, I mean, I think it can recognize like this can be helpful for people as a belief system or maybe part of their social support. There is validation for it, but when people actually start talking about intuitive experiences,
Mhm.
if they're sensitive to energy or empathic, it doesn't recognize that. If it
Mhm.
starts getting into more spiritual awakening where people are seeing, feeling, hearing things that other people don't see, feel, or hear, it can get mislabeled or misdiagnosed as like a psychosis based illness or a problem, or people are hesitant to bring it up. If
Mhm.
there is more and more acceptance in the field, I don't think that's going to happen everywhere, but people can be concerned with that.
Mhm.
As someone who bridges both worlds, though, I do also want to say that sometimes I've seen like some online spiritual communities or teachers like really just taking everything to say like, oh, this is just a spiritual awakening, where sometimes it's actually a mental health crisis
Mm.
also that may have spiritually based symptoms, but
Mhm.
meditating more, opening that up more may actually not really be a good idea at all if someone's really destabilized.
And how do you recognize that?
There's usually a loss of touch with physical reality or a hard
Okay.
time functioning.
Okay.
There's often a hard time there's often a loss of the observing ego. There's
Mhm.
many people who are very connected spiritually, but they know who to talk to that to about it and how it can sound.
Mhm.
And there's that filter.
Mhm.
If it's getting into a destabilization piece, people are often indiscriminately like, everybody should know this and you should get it and you should understand. Like,
Mhm.
this interdimensional thing, and why don't you know? And like lost,
Okay.
they may not be sleeping, they may not be going to work, not
Okay.
functioning well. It's like this may
Yeah.
have spiritual, there may be some spiritual stuff going on here, but there can be some serious mental health stuff happening too.
Okay, that makes sense.
Hmm.
All the stuff you're talking about too reminds me of my own childhood, and I didn't really understand it until becoming an adult, but going to school really felt very overwhelming to me, and I didn't really know why. I would look back and I think like I had friends bullied at one point, but it was only for like a year or so. It wasn't my whole educational life, but
Hmm.
I look back and I realize I was so empathic that I
Hmm.
just I walk into a room and I feel everybody's things and
Hmm.
emotions, and it's a lot. And I know now because now I know how to protect myself from those
Hmm.
energies and not be overwhelmed by it. But then I didn't
Yeah.
understand why I could walk in a room and feel anxious or feel sad or just feel like 20 different emotions at once. And I
Hmm.
think it's really important for moms to hear that message because sometimes they think, oh, my kid is just anxious or my kid is this or that. And it's sometimes their kid is just taking on all the emotions around them and it's not even their own.
For sure. Yeah. And I find I figured out my dominant intuitive ability was also empathic or clairsentient, and that was more like mid-20s that I and then it was a light bulb of like, how long has this been happening? Like the term highly sensitive person or highly sensitive child, that's well studied. It's research validated. It's pretty accepted in psychology. But then the empathic ability is not. Like there's not much research, if hardly any out there, and so it's
Mhm.
not commonly accepted. And I do find that it's a tough ability to learn to work with
Mhm.
initially. I've also done a lot of work with it, so I don't have the same, it's not my dominant ability anymore. I didn't want it to be. I've learned how to like I help people with that, of like how to manage it, how to separate it, and
Uh-huh.
do deeper healing work so we're not taking it all on
Yeah.
all the time. But yeah, a lot of times Western psychology, if you don't recognize that, like, oh, this is actually an intuitive ability, and you might, some of this is your own feelings, but some of it's not. You don't need
Mhm.
to process and journal and like have all these feelings move through you all the time. You need to get better at actually
Grounding.
processing your own feelings, but
Yeah.
not taking on everybody else's.
Yeah. So what
Yeah.
was the first step in you bridging traditional psychology with spirituality?
Yeah, I'd say the first piece, I mean, it's a really summarized version because this is over decades, but
Okay.
realizing intuition was real was a big part of it. Was one key moment, and like most people, for me it was ignoring it and being like, oh, this doesn't make any sense, I'm being quote unquote crazy, and then
Mhm.
finding out no, your paranoia was actually like intuitive information and not
Yeah.
it wasn't anything wrong or anxiety. And then it was once I started going through more of my own spiritual awakening, realizing I was empathic. I did spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to navigate that, how to work with those abilities, and kept it really separate from professional life because I wasn't strong enough in it yet to know how to
Mm.
work with that, what to do. I don't think people should go out and work with other people right away until they're really knowing what they're doing. And there was a number of years where I didn't even know if I'd be able to continue in psychology and do that kind of work. So I spent a
Okay.
while wrestling with that. Then I started to find ways or have ways revealed of existing therapeutic methods, other trainings, like postgraduate trainings that were evidence based, that had the research behind them to be able to offer them as a psychologist. Cause you can't just like do whatever.
Mhm. Can you share what those trainings were?
Yeah, they're not, I wouldn't say this is an exhaustive list, but it's
Okay.
often getting into anything that might work with like inner child healing, a lot of trauma processing modalities. So not just trauma informed, but these are ways to actually process old emotional memory, more family constellations to work with ancestral trauma or
Mhm.
energy, transpersonal psychology, which gets into the more the spiritual realm,
Okay.
spiritual
Do you
relationships.
have do you have like a key patient that just stands out where you were like, wow, this is really helpful to merge the two of these? Was there just this big aha moment when you were working with someone?
Well, I found for my like first and foremost, the part that kept driving it for me with myself to want to even offer it was I saw the change that happened for me as well.
Okay.
Like I found traditional therapy, like understanding things is really important to a certain level.
Mhm.
And many of the clients I work with will get here too. And that's when they'll find someone like me, is they've done the insight oriented stuff. They've read the
Mhm.
books. They understand like attachment theory. They understand my childhood is probably playing out or impacting me in these ways here. I can analyze this. I can analyze my parents like a few generations back, but you're still stuck in the same emotional cycles. And that
Mhm.
awareness doesn't necessarily translate to transformation or
Okay.
change. And so really finding tools that help you like move through that energy so it's you actually feel different in the day to day and you're not stuck in the same cycles and patterns. It was
Mhm.
seeing that power for myself and in working with other people
Okay.
that really stood out the most for me. And the element of like when this is intuitive, of this is someone's intuitive ability and helping them manage that versus oh
Mhm.
they're just anxious or
Okay.
mhm.
Okay. So what would you say is something people could start asking themselves to figure out if they have childhood trauma that is affecting the person that they are today?
Mhm. I think we all have some level of trauma. It's part of the human experience. It's really more anytime our nervous system goes into like fight, flight, freeze, we get this trapped emotional memory.
Mhm.
So when it's PTSD level, it can be flashbacks, it can be highly distressing, it can cause a lot of impairment, and people don't feel like themselves anymore. But even without that, I don't know a single adult who doesn't have some level of like
Right.
old emotional memory that comes into the present. We usually recognize it when after we've calmed down, we can look on it and say like, I don't rationally want to care that much or be that upset. Like I
Mhm.
quote unquote shouldn't. This
And then it's
doesn't
like,
make sense.
why?
But then it just when certain things happen, we're like 7 to 10 out of 10 in terms of emotional distress and we're right back in it.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
yeah.
So people need to look then at they take that moment where they finally calm down and then they need to do that reflection of like, okay, why? Where did that come from? What event was
Mhm.
that from? And process through that.
Yeah, and what is the emotions it stirs up in me? How intense is this? Because sometimes it's present emotion, but there's also like old emotion
Mhm.
blurring
Okay.
into the present as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So
Mm.
you had mentioned to me that you have this thing called planifestation.
Mhm.
I've
Yeah,
actually never heard anyone say
yeah.
that. I'm
I've
surprised.
heard other people, I can't take credit for it, but I
Yeah, but planning plus
mhm,
manifestation.
yeah.
So what can you share on what that means?
Yeah, well, I talk about there's a lot of things in kind of I think there's benefit for the psychological, the strategy, and the spiritual, and sometimes if you go too far on one extreme or the other, you can get into problems.
Okay.
And one of the things I found in terms of the toxic spirituality sometimes can just be the like, oh, manifest and meditate and this. And then it's like, and then just sit there and like wait for it to happen. Or like, oh, I just have this feeling I want to start a business. Or like, I just quit and I have no idea. and,
Yeah.
and I have no money. My rent's due and nobody's helping me. Like,
Yes.
so I think there's an element of rational mind and logic supporting
Mhm.
intuitive. And we need to build trust in intuitive over time and take kind of risks within our comfort zone to build that trust over time. But it takes time to kind of evolve and to build that. And there's also like work for us to do in that. And we don't
Mhm.
always know exactly what the results are going to be. So the desire of like, oh, I feel like I need to leave my current career or do this. It doesn't mean go quit your job. Like if you have the financial ability to do that, okay, that could be an option for you. That's
Right.
great. But if you don't, like start maybe taking an hour a week to research what you might want to do or explore
Mhm.
some different interests, like start talking to people.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that because I think a lot of people take manifestation the wrong way or misinterpret it for exactly like you're saying, just
Mhm.
I want it, so I'm just going to think about it. And that can be helpful, but also like we have to put the energy out into the universe, and that's through action, not just our
Mhm.
thoughts. And
Yeah.
I think people miss that piece sometimes.
It can get missed.
So, do you have ways that you help people to structure their planning and then ways to structure their manifestation or work on their manifestation?
Yeah, it's different person by person. I mean, sometimes if there is a lot of old belief system, old trauma, we may need to spend more time working through that
Okay.
first. I found that's another area where spirituality can get a bit toxic sometimes in certain communities where it's just manifest and just think positively. It can ignore the impact of trauma. It can ignore like the evolutionary nature of our nervous system of it doesn't actually work like that
Mhm.
to just tell a trauma survivor like just be safe and trust, think positive. I
So
think there's too
let's
much
talk
just
about
trust in general.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Toxic spirituality.
Mhm.
What are the top things you see that are like red flags or like, oh my gosh, this person has some toxic spirituality?
I think it's out there in a lot of areas that we just may not realize when we don't know kind of what to look for. And
Okay.
I think it's on a spectrum too, where most of it's really well meaning and it's just missing information or people don't know like what they don't know.
Mhm.
Because there's a time and place for gratitude research, positive psychology, like even visualizing. That can be great. But if you just take that and then now it's like you're not allowed to ever have a negative thought or you're manifesting something bad,
Mhm.
it's harmful to people. It doesn't help us individually because we're still, even if we're a spiritual being, we're still in this like human experience and
Mhm.
nervous system and brain. So
Mhm.
we also have to be able to work with that too. And
Mhm.
and so it can range from just taking more of a kind of a capitalist like consumer based ego driven manifestation because
Okay.
some of it can be very just materialistic where it's like if it's actually more soul level,
Yes.
that abundance may be part of it, but it's in service and it's never about just the accumulation of stuff.
Mhm. Okay. So you're saying it's toxic when it's ego driven, but it's positive spirituality when it's aligned with your soul, is kind of what I hear you saying.
Yeah, when it feels more of like, oh, and sometimes it tells like we'll get guidance of things. It might be a riskier guidance. It may not be the safe path. It may be a
Mhm.
financial risk. And often like there we may have to work on certain parts within our own self to like receive in a sustainable way. And it can get toxic when it's overly focused on positive, like positive to the pace of like people aren't allowed to have a real human experience or they're like
Mhm.
failing at their spirituality or
Or
manifesting bad things.
sweeping things under the rug. I think that's a common thing with toxic
Yeah.
positivity. It's like something negative happens and instead of processing through it, it's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna say it's all good. It's good. Everything's
Yeah.
fine. Everything's fine." And
Yeah.
they just keep moving forward. But
Mhm.
meanwhile, it still happened. You were still bothered by it and you never even dealt with how you were bothered by it. And I think that's a big problem for a lot of people that they aren't
Yeah.
recognizing. Because I feel like we're like in this weird place where positivity is a huge thing that people are
Mhm.
talking about on social media and just think positive and here's the positive thoughts and this.
Mhm.
And then there's that fine line, that in between
Mhm.
space where like I mean, it's okay. Like you're saying, some people will feel like they can't have these negative emotions,
Mhm.
but it is okay to have those emotions. Like that's a real human experience that you need
Yeah.
to have
And
and
not
work.
only is it okay, it's healthy. Like it's
Yeah.
problematic if we're never feeling the hard emotions, if we're
Mhm.
never letting ourselves feel the difficult emotions, because they don't go away. We just drive them into underground and carry them with us.
Well,
And
and
they'll come
then
out in other ways.
And then what kind of positivity are you even carrying with you? Like
Yeah.
it's such a false positivity, right? Instead of like I
Mhm.
worked through that negative, difficult emotion and it
Mhm.
made me realize and have gratitude. And then that's what actually gives you real positivity, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I think there's this piece that we can get in our head about it and over analytical of like it's this or this feeling, whereas our
Mhm,
heart and whole being, it's like we can feel all of it at the same time, and we may
mhm.
go through different feelings within the same situation, like in the same day, because you can be grieving, hurt, heartbroken. Like I think there's this piece of like on the human level, there's lots of stuff that's like not right, not okay, that
Mhm,
anger, sadness, like hurt, betrayal are all valid emotions and things we need safe space to actually feel it to move through it, because then we're not carrying it with us at the same level, and it
mhm,
may need to be felt over and over again at different points. And then when people have that space to feel that, if they have that spiritual connection or they're open to that, like usually that's the time where that spiritual connection can come in, and there may be even people may have their own guidance of like, okay, there's a soul lesson in here, there's this, but it's both. Like our human self is like, this still effing sucks. And okay, there's some kind of meaning in it.
Yeah,
I don't want to do it this way again,
yeah,
but like, doesn't mean that behavior is okay. Or,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, and I feel like the people that just completely sweep it under the rug, they're bulldozing these emotions of like guilt that you probably have. Like it comes on and then you feel kind of guilty. So instead, it's like, well, I don't want to feel that way. And then they just,
Mm,
so it's like all these other emotions just stack up. You first might be angry with the situation, but then you like just sweep it under the rug. And then you're feeling kind of guilty that you didn't even like process it. It compounds to such a bigger thing than actually just going through it and being positive all the time because
yeah.
it's just
Oh,
not
and people
reality.
can do it to themselves, but then we do it to other people too. And
Oh, let's
so,
talk
and
about
then,
that.
well, because if someone's going through a really hard time, and I've supported individual people through this so much, and even just in the therapy world, when as a society overall, like take out the spirituality piece in general, but oftentimes when people are going through like tragedy, hard loss,
Mhm,
serious situations, death, terminal illness, like people have a really hard time knowing how to help or how to show up, and that's where a
mhm,
lot of that, at least in toxic positivity, can come in, which just
mhm,
often further isolates people and kind of
mhm.
puts this extra emotional labor on them to like take care of other people or be like, hey, I can't save this here. Be fine. And I have to pretend to be like, oh, thank you. And I'm going to manifest this, versus someone being able to just hold empathic space and listen and let them have their real emotions and let them lead. Like, okay, do they want spiritual support, or do they want to go there? Do they need to just be in their human emotions and just vent for a while?
So the toxic positivity, are you saying then is on the person that's trying to comfort that person? Instead, they're just like, "Oh, you'll be fine." Is that kind of what you're referencing?
Yeah, when people are going through a hard time, it's often like the amount of I've had clients where they're going through cancer, their kid has something super serious, and people are like, here's this article, and here's how to manifest, and they're getting bombarded with this, and there's hardly anyone showing up being like, how are you actually doing?
Yeah,
Or
like,
like,
it's
or like,
okay.
I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. Like this is so hard.
Yeah, I can see that where some
Mhm.
people just wanna uplift you and they think their job is to just, like, swoop in and be the hero, and
Mhm.
yeah, like, "Okay, here's how I'm gonna help you, and it's just gonna be better because we're gonna do this," instead of just, yeah, letting you
Yeah.
grieve, and
Yeah.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um,
Mhm.
okay, so you talk about trusting your intuition.
Mhm.
How do you teach people to trust their intuition?
Yeah.
Actually, answer the question of what is your intuition? Because I know everybody seems to have a different definition.
Mhm. Yeah, I think intuition is really, when it comes to the spiritual awakening side of things, it doesn't have to be religious, but it's kind of
Mhm,
this, whether it's source, universe, higher self, like something bigger than yourself, a direct experience with that. And I think intuition is the way we get information from that source, like
mhm.
the way it directly communicates with us.
Okay.
That is ideally providing like helpful guidance
Mhm,
for us.
mhm,
um, and it can look very different for different people in terms of what their abilities and gifts are, or how those open up
mhm.
over time. Mhm.
Okay. So how do you teach people to start trusting that voice, that intuitive
Yeah.
voice?
So I help people really sort out, okay, what if this is old stuff from the past? Like, what if this might be, how do we recognize when this is an old emotional memory or old trauma that's stored in the nervous system somewhere? Because
Mhm.
sometimes there may be a big reaction, and people, that
Mhm.
can be a hard thing for intuition to be like, oh, my whole body's freaking out. And like, it's a no. And it's like,
Mhm.
actually, this might be an old, it's still intuitive information. It's showing us something is there, but it may not be full true intuition yet.
Okay.
One of my teachers, Dr. Beth Hedva, talks about pure intuitive information is the body is relaxed, the mind is calm, and the heart is open when you receive it. So it's
Mhm.
often a knowing or a message, and there's no fear. Like, it's
Mhm.
relaxed, it's open. If one of those isn't open yet, we haven't fully arrived at like the full
Okay.
intuitive truth yet.
Okay. Yeah, I always say, and I feel like the intuition is just when it kind of comes out of nowhere
Mhm.
and it's like you weren't even thinking about it. And it's like, where did that thought even come from? Like that was not even on my radar to think
Yeah.
about it at all. And then, it just has to have come from this higher place. But I also believe that our souls get this kind of blueprint before we're
Yeah.
born. And I know that's maybe just my own like
Mhm.
personal download that I feel like I've had, but
Mhm.
I feel like we get this blueprint when we're born to kind of guide us. And so
Yeah.
when we get those intuitive hits, it's like that was already with us, some of it. Like that
Yeah.
deja vu that people feel like they've had. It's like, well, that was already kind of imprinted in you before you were born. And
Mhm.
it's just that validation of you're exactly where you're meant to be and you're on the right path.
Yeah, I talk in the book about there can be like signs and synchronicities that come up. So people get it in different ways.
Mhm.
Uh, those little coincidences, and then we tend to have one or two dominant sensory gateways too. So I have a
Okay.
free quiz on my site to help people get a sense of what theirs might be. If you said
Okay.
you're empathic, that's probably one, and one of them can be just knowing without knowing why or how you know. So
Okay.
that can be very individual for you and people who have that ability. Others, it could be visual or it may be auditory as well. It
Mhm.
just it's a sensory information, but has a very different quality to it. Some people will get goosebumps if like time might feel like it slows down. There can be a synchronicity to it. It often maybe feel like an answer or something like speaking
Mhm.
directly to you about something you've been struggling with or asking questions around.
Mhm.
And we're more likely to get it. Like, we need time out of our rational mind where we're
Mhm.
either just in the present moment, whether that's like meditation, walking in nature, like those times where we just are, and then it kind of comes together and this knowing bubbles up or comes through.
Mhm. So back to teaching people how to lean into their intuition,
Mhm.
you're saying if your heart is open and your mind is calm and your body's calm and all these things, but how do you teach people to get to that place?
Yeah, I think it's an ongoing process and like a journey
Okay.
versus a destination. It's something that continues to unfold for me even today.
Mm.
But some of it is saying if we want to make more space for it, we have to actually make some space. Like, we need to
Mhm.
put in our week to week, like, where can we have those little moments where it is more likely to come in, even
Mhm.
if that's just journaling a few pages in the morning before you jump up and get into the to-do list.
Mhm.
Having like, is it yoga, nature
Mhm.
walks, like having that space where it can actually come in and have more of a practice. Knowing your dominant intuitive ability is a really good way too, because then practice with that one specifically. The more you practice with the ones you're dominant with, the other ones can open up on their own, but it's harder to access those if they're not your dominant ability.
I feel like people listening will be like, well, how do I know which one is my dominant ability?
Yeah, you can journal. I mean, you can take the free quiz and see if that helps. I have like a
Okay.
6-week free series that goes with that too. It
Uh-huh.
is reflecting on past times of like, when was your intuition right? Or when are
Mhm.
times, keeping a journal around it. And again, like, permission to write anything in that journal that may or may not be intuitive.
Mhm.
Practicing with lower emotional stakes things can really help, because we want intuitive guidance like as our best wise friend when we're really stressed out, to like, what decision should I make? These are big consequences.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's the hardest time to access it. So if it's more of like, I have no emotional skin in this game at all, like, I'm going to someone's house I've never met before, I'm going to see how I feel in my body. I'm going to check in, what kind of visual impressions do I get? Just jot those down and then see, like, is any of this actually true?
Mhm.
The whole like trust your intuition is, I think that gets thrown out around a little too tough, of like, oh, just trust. But trust is something we earn with other people. Like, trust is not something we just have in general. And trust is something I have learned to develop. And I trust intuition because it's actually been helpful over time and I have evidence of it.
Mhm.
And there's still times where I don't 100% trust it, but I trust it more.
That is very fair to say.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I feel that way too. Sometimes people ask me, "Well, what do you think? What do you think?" Because they know I'm intuitive, but I'm like,
Mhm.
"Man, I don't know on this one. I have too many emotions coming in." Because sometimes I just can't push out my own emotional experiences that I've had that are kind of triggering thoughts and things
Yeah.
around something. I'm like, I can't see straight right now. I don't know.
Yeah. I also help people work with that. Like, because when our emotions are really tied in, it's like we got to settle that down. It's
Yeah.
almost like static on the line. You will not get a
Mhm.
clear answer when
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff stirred up. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you ever recommend people just journal? I really like to just do that guided journaling where I just, trust that the higher power is going to just take that pen from my hand and just write the words that need to come through.
Yeah, for sure. That definitely can work for some people. Like any technique, there's no one thing that works for everyone.
Right.
So it's usually more helping people identify like what is their dominant ability, what ways might help for them. I'm always using clinical skill and intuition. So sometimes I'll just get stuff where I'm like, I'm getting the sense of this. Does this resonate for you? Like
Mhm.
spending time in water or nature, like something more specific for a person. And
Yeah.
if they're open to, they can try that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally get that because when I'm working with people too, I'm like, I'm seeing this. Does this make any sense to you? And then, yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
totally it can guide them.
Mhm.
So, what do you think is just, I mean, obviously I have my own opinion, but what is your opinion on the importance of merging spirituality with psychology?
Mhm. Well, for me, when I was learning more in the spiritual realm and didn't bring it together, some of the changes and transformations I could see in that work was just beyond what I was taught was possible
Mhm.
in psychology. It was also changing my sense of worldview from like we're just this individual person,
Mhm.
like in our own energy by ourselves versus this like multi-layered, complex,
Mhm.
energetic being who's also physical,
Mhm.
but some of the things were not like the roots of it isn't a conscious mind concern, or it may sound like people may have a phobia of something that doesn't make any sense with their history, but somewhere in that energetic field that actually does. Like it might be childhood, it can be ancestral or like a past life
Okay. Yeah.
sometimes. So sometimes when you can clear that stuff on that deeper level, it's like the issue would go away for people
Mhm.
or like dramatically change. And yeah.
That makes a lot of sense to be able to
Mhm.
bring in these other dimensions because, as you're saying, if we're just sticking with the traditional psychology, it's just kind of the science behind how the brain works, but it isn't bringing in that spiritual piece of why the brain works the way it does. Because, yes, some of it is trauma from a past life, and some of it is trauma that we don't even remember as a child. And so I
Mhm.
think it's really important to bring that in. That makes a lot of sense. So I think that's really helpful for people. I wish there were more psychologists like you that
I think there's quite a few out like, there are more and more out there.
okay.
Part of why I wrote the book too is there are professionals out there, and there's research on this too around, like, the high percent of even, like, academics, scientists, researchers who've had profound spiritual experience that guide the course of their work. They don't talk about it with anyone.
Mhm.
Many public people, you find them through a back door, like, through a friend or someone else who's like, "Oh, I think you'll like them," and then you kinda get the sense because we have to walk this line also, and depending on where we're working, if private practice or a system, like
Mhm.
if you're in a system you got to be careful of, you have so many different clients coming to you, you can't put your worldview on anyone. If you're private practice, you have more freedom of like just marketing to be like, this is how I help, this is what I do, like if you like me you come to me, if you don't, you do not like me, that's okay. You can go like someone else can help you.
Yeah.
So you get people who are looking for that of what you're offering, but very few people talk about it publicly. And when you kind of Google spiritual awakening, like spiritual symptoms, you get such, I call it like the wild west of people speaking about it, which there's some
Mhm.
very helpful, like grounded, helpful guidance out there. And there's also some stuff that I've seen that I'm just really stresses me out of like, and I've seen the aftermath in, I've had my own bad experiences in looking like not just the psychology mental health side, but more of the totally unregulated energy
Mhm.
healing, even like big name people that
Mm.
I was like, oh, I'd never send anyone to this person ever. And I've seen that aftermath with clients in my office from like boundary violations to like actually some pretty complex trauma because of getting too close to
Mhm.
very spiritually gifted, charismatic people that are not emotionally mature people, not self-aware, not doing their own work, or may even have like personality pathology, and they just didn't know what to look for and were very vulnerable and very open. Because I think in spiritual spaces, a lot of people can go being like, well, you're here for the right reasons. Like you're here for love and light and you want this. And so they can go in more open and more vulnerable and
Mhm.
not know what to look for. So that's kind of part of why I put the book together. Cause I'm like, I'm really tired of nobody
Mhm.
like challenging some of this. And most of it's a call for people of like, when we don't know enough about a subject, we think we know more than we do. So I think
Mhm.
sometimes people are stepping into it just not knowing
Mhm.
what they don't know. And then
Yeah.
there's others where it's like, oh, they're not. There's a small percentage. There's more documentaries coming out that are kind of blowing the lid off some things.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are some key takeaways that people would get from your book?
It's meant as a general roadmap and some reflection questions and journaling prompts to look at.
Okay.
Here's some perspectives to consider and places to go to get more information to be like, is this safe for you to be awakening? Like,
Mhm.
here's some basics around trauma. And then again, around how can we do better for
Mhm.
ourselves to allow ourselves to be human beings, spiritual beings, having human experiences, to have places for that for people.
Mm.
Because I'm holistic in my approach, many spiritual communities can think that means I'm anti medication or anti
Mhm.
Western approaches. I'm like, no, I think holistic's everything. And sometimes people may need medication or like hormone replacement therapy as a
Mhm.
part of a comprehensive treatment plan.
Mhm.
I don't prescribe, but I've seen communities really like shun people or stigmatize them or be like almost like, oh, you're not being spiritual enough because you're not trying hard enough with serious consequences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I understand. There's a time and place for medicine
Yeah.
completely.
Yeah.
So, lastly, I want to ask, what has been your most profound spiritual awakening or event?
Yeah, it's hard. There isn't a single event because I kind of live with
Okay.
one foot in both worlds all the time. So I'm always working in it. Like when I'm with clients, I'm in that, I'm with clinical experience, but I'm also in that energetic field. So I pick up on like childhood things,
Okay.
ancestral stuff, messages from people who've passed. I was aware of my own daughter like years before she ever came into being. I connect with people on the other side
Mhm.
regularly. So it changes how I live my day to day.
Okay. But okay, do you have, like, one standout moment, though? Or, like,
Mm.
standout story?
I mean, there's stuff like there's so much that
Yeah, I
happens
mean,
so regularly a lot of the time
well,
that
and yeah, and to you, it's like, "Eh, whatever," like, I
yeah.
see them people all the time and, but
Yeah.
to other people listening, it's like, "Well, I wanna hear about this. What is this
Yeah.
like? I have not experienced it."
Yeah, it's very rare that I see it in the physical, like, sometimes
Okay.
I'll just get a feeling or something. It's
Yeah.
more like mind's
Like
eye
that. Mhm.
and, like, messages and things, but it's not like the movies. It's a lot more subtle. It's really
Mhm.
not, like, dramatic. It's not super scary or anything like
Yeah.
that. So
I know, I hate the spiritual shows, like, I've tried to watch them, and I'm like, the music, they just, like, dramatize it, I'm like, "It is nothing like this," and they make it feel like a horror film
they do,
if you're
yeah.
seeing a spirit or
Yeah.
something, and it's like, they don't come at you going, "Woo," like,
No. They
it's
can't they
not
don't hurt you, like, I mean,
yeah,
I wouldn't mess around with stuff, like, don't play with things you don't know what you're doing or, like,
yeah,
do things with bad intention, but it's more of, like, often if there's stuff there, they're just stuck and need help. It's like any other sad or angry person.
mhm, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. I think that's been helpful. That's a lot of different information for people to process through on spirituality and psychology. So, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.